factories throughout the Inland Empire. If you want a pathway to a high-paying job and the respect that comes with a union contract, visit 1932trainingcenter.org to enroll today. That's 1932trainingcenter.org.
Are you underpaid and overworked? Is a living wage and employee benefits like affordable health care more of a dream than a reality for you and your family? If so, it's time to form a union. Don't be denied the wages and benefits you deserve. Come together in a union with the power of numbers. A union is not a privilege, it's your right, and it will make a difference. Contact Teamsters Local 1932, a powerful and successful labor union in San Bernardino, by visiting Teamsters1932.org/organize to start today. Labor unions built the middle class, and the middle class built America. That's the message from Teamsters Local 1932, a strong and successful labor union based in San Bernardino that represents over 14,000 hardworking people across the Inland Empire. The Teamsters are ready to help you organize for better pay, increased benefits, and improved working conditions. Reach out to Teamsters 1932 at Teamsters1932.org/organize to speak with an organizer today.
One of the best ways to build a healthier local economy is by shopping locally. Teamster Advantage is a shop local program started by Teamster Local 1932 that has brought together hundreds of locally owned businesses to provide discounts for residents who make shopping locally their priority. Everything from restaurants like Corky's to fun times at SB Raceway and much, much more. If you're not currently a Teamster and you want access to these local business discounts, contact Jennifer at 909-889-8377, extension 224. Give her a call. That number again is 909-889-8377, extension 224.
The Working Class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. I'm not sure that this is still a story because it happened way, way back at sometime between 10 a.m. and 10:30 this morning. Who knows by then, from then till now, there could have been another shooting that could have bumped this from the top spot on the headlines. But someone armed with an AR-15 rifle, an AR-15 pistol, and a handgun murdered 3 9-year-old kids and three staff members at a small Christian elementary school in Nashville, Tennessee. And according to the folks over at K-12 school shooting database, yes, there is a K-12 school shooting database. Someone is keeping a database of all of the school shootings and all of the numbers that have been skyrocketing the last several years. This is the 89th shooting in a K through 12 school this year. The 89th this year, three 9-year-olds murdered. And this is one of these things that, I sit and I think about, 3 9-year-olds. What did these kids do to anyone to deserve this? And the thing is the reason I said, who knows if it's still a story, is these school shootings are now so common that we're even spinning what to call them anymore. It was, we don't say shooter anymore. We say aggressor. And I saw that in the headlines. I'm going, what? And you know where this is coming from. The gun lobby, the NRA, well, the NRA, sounds more pro-freedom, aggressor. Doesn't sound as negative as a shooter, which is something very direct. And police engaged the shooter. They didn't kill the shooter, which, good. I mean, I'm in this point where I'm struggling with, one, our language, and the fact that we're not going to do anything about this. Yeah, I mean, we're not even, here's the thing, we're not even doing hopes and prayers anymore. There are no more thoughts and prayers. No more of that. They're just, oh, well, it's a shame. And immediately, you turn on the disinformation machines, otherwise known as our social media, and into hyperdrive. The disinformation hyperdrive mode engaged. And it's not about 3 9-year-old children who were murdered. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with the 3 adults who were murdered. Again, by someone with a gun. Nope, not the gun. It's not the gun's fault. No. And look, it's political opportunism. It's silo thinking. This time, it's a trans person, so it must be. So all the transphobes come out and say, it's this. It's still the gun. The gun still did it. At the end of the day, I know, Rick, it's only a tool. Yes, it is a tool. It is the preferred tool, the AR-15, the preferred tool for murdering people. That's the sad reality of the world that we're in right now. And what have we done to do anything? Were there any background checks? I guarantee you there were red flags all over the place for this person for years. I guarantee there were red flags. We're gonna start hearing this, coming out, dripping out, drip by drip. But again, we've done nothing. And what have our elected leaders done? Well, we put out a tweet. We do some social media stuff. Republicans have done a great job of banning drag shows. We're banning books. We're making sure that children are safe from, those evil things they can see. Guns, not so much. We got representatives who are putting out Christmas cards, posing with guns like it's some fetish that they've got. Like, I'm making a statement. And it's this sickness that's gripped us. And look, I'm not a gun grabber by any sense, by any sense of the imagination. But at some point, simple common sense stuff. Some background checks, some simple paperwork, registering things, some simple stuff, knowing who has guns and maybe who shouldn't. Tennessee, where this happened, this year, Republicans in 2023 have, like I said, banned drag shows. They're going after abortion. They're trying to open up marriage for younger kids. But they've expanded access for guns to younger people. So now we're going to lower the carry age down to 18 from 21. And I suspect as these school shootings continue to happen, and they will, because the calls have already been out there, that we should arm the children in the classroom, because already the teachers are, we're going to arm the teachers. Think about the logic in this. Walk with me, if you will. We're going to give a teacher a deadly weapon. We're going to give them a gun. We're going to give them the ability to make split-second life and death decisions on who lives and who dies in one of these situations. But, we really don't want you in charge of what our kids read. We really don't want that movie. We really don't want that song. I mean, it's nuts where we are on this issue. And of course, the politicians are figuring out what they're going to do. And Jim Jordan, to his credit, they've called off the gun markup period, because evidently there was a planned markup of a gun rights resolution for tomorrow. They have postponed that, because it would look bad. That they're going to stand on the firmly on the grounds of, we're going to make sure guns are everywhere. I'm sure that's going to happen down the road, just not right now. But here's my problem. Immediately, the propaganda machine went into full tilt boogie. Some right-wing propaganda site tweeted out, breaking in Georgia. The ATF is, raiding a large gun store. Marjorie Three Names and a couple other representatives are out there defending the gun stores. Where were they? Literally, as these children are being murdered, they're defending the gun stores. And I'm going, maybe you couldn't be at a school, spend your time doing that. No, this is, they're taking on government, because they can't have government overseeing who has guns. They can't have government overseeing, how guns are sold, because, we do have laws, but no, not for guns. cigarettes and alcohol and stuff like that. Okay, fine, but we can't have inspections for guns. And they made a big to-do about it. In fact, the lieutenant governor of Georgia, he has vowed to investigate the ATF for having the audacity, the unmitigated gall to inspect this gun store in Smyrna, Georgia. And it's one of these moments where you go, which side did you find yourself? We know Republicans are on the side of the gun manufacturers and the gun companies and the NRA. We know this. Under the guise of, we care about your Second Amendment rights. But the weird thing is most sane, rational gun owners that I know, myself included, not against background checks, not against, some form of registration, not against the idea of some competency, not against red flag laws to where if a relative goes, hey, you know what? This person's going through a rough patch. Maybe not a great idea. And this is just one of these kind of moments where I'm angry and I'm frustrated. And I know as a country we are, because we feel helpless, because this is another issue where the polarization has put us in a position where we can't protect our kids. And I know the argument from the right is always more guns, and the argument for the left is no guns. No, that's not actually true. I've never actually heard someone on the left say we're going to go grab all the guns. I've heard them say, do we really need 100-round magazines? Do we need to give these murderers the tools of mass destruction to cause enormous damage? And the thing is, I was looking at some of the graphs today of the number of shootings and the number of dead, and it coincides with this gun fetish. Look, we've always had guns. As long as I've known, people have had them. In fact, when I was a kid, growing up in the projects, you saw somebody with a gun, duck, someone's going to die. That's how things went in the projects where I grew up. It's kind of just this moment in history where, and I know, it's not the guns. People kill people, it's not the guns. But, the gun really does help. And the question I have is, what are our elected leaders doing? The answer is nothing. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you got a thought, question, comment, want to hear it. I'll take a quick break. Right back on the other side.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So what a fun weekend. What a fun weekend. Trump in Waco. The Waco in Waco. I could just see the headline. Trump 2024, this time is different. We're going deeper, darker, more vengeful, and more self-absorbed. More self-absorbed than ever. It's the final battle. I mean, out of his entire spiel, that was really the tone. If you think we were crazy before, we're going crazy town. There is no depths to how bad things are going to get. And did you expect any different? Now, what I find interesting is the folks over at the New York Post, again, always very sympathetic to Trump, always on the Trump train. But the New York freaking Post, their lines were, he hasn't changed in the slightest. There is no shame. And after riling up rioters cheering for a coup and agreeing that his vice president needed to be hanged, he's back to making violent threats against fellow Americans. And you go, this is the Post, a friendly outlet. And this is one of those things, you knew Trump was going to come back in full grievance mode, filled with the wildest and the most bizarre rhetoric possible. You knew that was going to happen because it's what the base craves. The base wants violence. The base wants the hyper, just loaded rhetoric. They want the outrage. And he understands that. He's just giving the people what they want. And what they want is the most arrogant, self-absorbed, most outlandish Trump can be. And he did not disappoint. It was a long hour and 40-minute spiel of every grievance you could come up with. And, my mind kept going, if Trump is indicted, and I expect, it's possible there's going to be one. It's possible because there are multiple ongoing criminal investigations right now, and a couple civil. And the thing is, he's only going to get worse as those things get heated up. As the investigations ramp up, he's going to get worse. Exactly what the faithful want. They want that image of Rambo Trump. That's what they want. They want somebody who's ready to, my Tea Party dentist, told me that he voted for him because he wants chaos. There are people who really, truthfully want the chaos that this guy is going to bring. And the thing is what we saw on Saturday from Waco, which interesting place. The 30th anniversary of what happened in Waco with David Koresh and the ATF and all of that. Interesting place to choose this while talking about violence, because what we know is out of what happened in Waco, we ended up getting someone like Timothy McVeigh to go and blow up a federal building a couple years later. There's part of me, and mark your calendar, April 19th, I'm expecting some crazy. I'm expecting these people who are hearing the dog whistle to go, we hear you, sir. Major Nimrod reporting for duty. And I'm expecting some crazy stuff on April 19th because that was the dog whistle of this whole thing. Because his platform is all about retribution. It's all about his extremism. It's all about, potentially violence. That's what came out of Saturday's spiel. And there's no doubt that he's willing to take this country down a very, very dark path solely to save himself. And I saw this article that said, Trump's not afraid. He's enjoying the legal battles. This Barbara Ress wrote that he's feeling pressure, but not the kind of pressure that a normal person would feel. No. I don't think he's fearing jail or anything like that because he knows he's never going to jail. If anything, it'll be a fine. If anything, it'll be, I'm sorry. If anything, it'll be years of legal fees. He doesn't care about any of that. He knows people like him don't go to jail because we don't hold our elites responsible. Which is why I'm in favor of these investigations going forward. And the thing that bothers me is I just saw this Wall Street Journal NORC poll that came out. They pointed out that this is remarkable to me. 38% of the people who responded to their poll said patriotism was very important to them. 39% said religion was important to them. And you go, about a third, a little over a third, that doesn't sound bad. When you go back to 1998, the godless years of Bill Clinton, because remember, we're hyper, white nationalist Christian nation. Back in 98, when asked about patriotism, 70% of the people said that, yes, patriotism was important to them. the flag waving on the pole, all of the things around, God and country and all that stuff were front and center, and people took to it. 62% said religion was important. I mean, the fact that we've gone way, again, the rhetoric, hyper nationalist, hyper, waving the flag, hyper religiosity, but the American people are falling away from it. So is it that it's just a handful of hardcore, or is it, a certain party? What I also found interesting out of this Wall Street Journal poll is that tolerance for other people, back in the in years past, had been somewhere around the 80% mark. As recent as just 4 years ago, it's down to 58%. This idea that we're going to be decent to each other, I mean, it's remarkable to me. And what I find interesting, and my son brought this up to me it's been a couple of months now. He said it's sad, and it is. This is horribly sad. He said, when I see someone carrying the American flag, I immediately think that they're crazy and hate our country. Immediately, I think there's some wacko who wants to do harm to our nation. And you go, how's this happened? Well, you've got this authoritarian figure who's feeding the outrage candy to the masses, hyper religious, hyper, patriotic. And you look at this scene of all of these people in Waco, who you got to think outside of the political realm, and I know a lot of these people, or people like them. They're good, decent people until you start talking about politics, until you bring Trump's name up. Somehow this guy has radicalized them to the point to where they're willing to fight neighbors. They're willing to tear up and wanting to tear apart their community for some bizarre reason, because they've been sold this idea that their way of life is under attack, that they're under attack. And what's interesting is they all say how much they love the flag and how they respect the flag, and yet they're wearing flag clothing, which is a violation of the flag code. They're carrying a flag, over their shoulder at the wrong angle, violation of the flag code. Dragging it along the ground, violation of the flag code. On the back of a truck, dragging along the ground, violation. A giant flag with Trump's face on it, major violation. But lost on these folks, because again, it's not patriotism to country. It's not patriotism to our nation and to the history of our country. It's allegiance to this authoritarian type, I believe. They have found their dear leader, which is why, none of the stuff that has come out, they believe. When you show them evidence, go, here it is, paid hush money to a porn star. And then he mocks her as, she's just horse-faced. They eat that up. And we're in this weird kind of place where I think the only way forward, and I've had my left friends say, we've got to stop him from running, and I'm going, no. As a country, we cannot do that. He has to be the nominee in 2024. He has to be. Because he's framed this already for the Republican Party as this is the final battle. This is, and for the religious minded, they're going, oh, this is it. Jesus, he's our David Koresh. He's our Messiah. He's going to come back with a sword and he's going to cut those libs to pieces. This is the sad world that we're in right now with a lot of these folks. And while it's frightening, I think we have to go through what 24 is going to bring us. And he has to be defeated at the polls. Resoundingly. We as Americans have to come together and say, these are not our values. The kind of violence, the kind of grievance politic, the kind of hatred that comes out of this, not our politics. Not who we are as a nation. We're better than this. We want a future for our children. We want a nation governed by we the people, instead of this polarized system where nothing gets done except throwing bombs at each other. And you know why nothing gets done? Because the wealthy and the elite don't want it. And this is where you and we have to come back together. Look, those people who showed up in Waco for the Whack Fest, you're never reaching them. We got to move on without them. The rational left of us have got to organize together, got to come together if we're going to have a future. If there is going to be a way forward, it's going to have to be with the rest of us putting aside our petty differences and going, you know what, we do want a nation where if you work hard and play by the rules, you get ahead. We do want a nation where we have opportunity for our families. We do want a nation where there's true freedom, instead of what's been sold to us by the grievance crowd. And we can do it. And I'm telling you, it just comes back to you and me. It comes back to us standing together, taking off the red hat and the blue hat, putting on a hard hat, and rebuilding this nation. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. That was the day Indiana State Police began cracking heads of picketers in front of the Richmond International Harvester Plant. The Farm Equipment Workers Organizing Committee, or FEWOC, called a strike at 6 Midwestern plants earlier in the year. 14,000 workers walked out demanding an elimination of piecework, wage increases, re-employment guarantees for draftees, and union recognition. Lucy Parsons addressed strikers in Chicago. She reminded them of her husband's frame-up and murder in 1886. She added that the McCormicks and International Harvester had continued their unending war against labor for over 50 years. In Richmond, workers voted 5-1 for a strike. Harvester officials planned to reopen the plant with members of the Independent Union. FEWOC battled these so-called unions at all the plants. They were the rehashed old company unions the National Labor Relations Board had ordered disbanded. Reports varied widely as to the number of workers ready to betray the strike at the Richmond plant. When they marched toward the gate that morning, strikers closed ranks and sang Solidarity Forever. The battle began as strikers armed with bricks and bats fought police to prevent the scabbing. More than 80 strikers were arrested on charges ranging from assault and battery to attempted murder. The state police and Richmond officers then raided strike headquarters and downtown CIO offices. Records and correspondence were seized and furniture demolished. FEWOC leader Cliff Kerr avowed they are not going to get away with this brutal, undemocratic attack on the workers. The union intends to fight. The combined effort of the city, the police, and the Harvester Company are not going to break this strike. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Until recently, kids were thrilled when their parents said, "We're going to Disney World." But that was in the before times, before Florida's autocratic governor put Disney World under the control of his state's thought police, turning it into DeSantis World. Having made kid-friendly Disney kowtow to his own magic kingdom of right-wing ideological conformity, Governor Ron is now demanding that the entire Sunshine State convert to the darkness of DeSantis World. A major tactic in his push is to rewrite the state's school books to, quote, protect young ones from having to learn that such historical unpleasantness as racism and sexism have shaped their society and are still doing so. To advance Ron Think, he has rammed his Stop Woke Act into law, requiring teachers to soften or just eliminate references to America's racial problems. Pretend it never happened is Professor DeSantis' instruction. Indeed, one educational publisher obediently followed his dictate by rewriting the uplifting 1955 story of Rosa Parks confronting the flagrant institutional racism of Montgomery, Alabama's public bus service. Before DeSantis, the publisher told the story straight. Quote, in her city, the law said African Americans had to give up their seats if a white person wanted to sit down. Parks would not give up her seat. The police came and took her to jail. Now, after desantification, here's the publisher's rewrite. One day, Parks rode the bus. She was told to move to a different seat. She did not. She did what she believed was right. No reference to her even being African American or to the law requiring her to bow to any white person's demand for her seat. And no mention of police hauling her to jail because of the color of her skin. This is Jim Hightower saying, DeSantis World is where people's dream of social justice goes to die.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, my favorite tweet today came from President Biden, who said, I'm sick and tired of companies breaking the law to keep workers from organizing. He says, it's time to pass the PRO Act. Workers have a right to form a union. And look, this is where having someone in the White House championing this stuff is so important. It is the law of the land that government is to encourage workers to join and form unions, to bargain for better wages, hours, and conditions. You wonder why we've had stagnant wages for 40, 50 years? It's because unions have been on decline. But there's good news and there's good opportunities on the future. You look at what happened in Illinois, passing an amendment to ensure that workers have the right to organize. And Michigan, like I said the other day, if I could sing a song about Michigan, I would. They have repealed their no rights at work law, and that's why I've asked Michigan State Representative Jasper Martis to come share some thoughts. He represents the 69th State House District in Michigan. Jasper, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much, Rick. Happy to spread the good word of what we're doing in Michigan. And while I'm very proud of what we're doing here in Michigan, hoping that it's going to set a precedent for other states across the country to follow and hopefully, God willing, at the national stage as well.
Yeah, Wisconsin, I'm looking at you. West Virginia, looking at you. Because, look, Jim Justice, the Republican governor of West Virginia, said, look, we passed no rights at work. We repealed prevailing wage laws, and it didn't help. In fact, made things actually worse. So you, I believe, in Michigan have set the course of let's start undoing this stuff and give workers the tools to go through this. So I guess let's start. What's this feel like? I mean, this is a major, to steal a Joe Bidenism, this is a BFD.
This is a BFD, and it's a long time coming. The Republicans, a little over a decade ago, when they had a trifecta, passed right to work, or as you say, no rights at work, in the dead of night, no committee hearings, during a lame duck session. It was undemocratic. It was just the worst things people think about politics were done when right to work was instituted here in Michigan. And it was not just bad policy. You pass right to work in any state, it's going to be bad policy. But I think particularly disrespectful in Michigan, birthplace of the UAW, really just a strong union background in almost every family in Michigan. Even if you're not a member of a union, your parents or your grandparents, your great-grandparents were. So not only was it bad policy, I think it was disrespectful to the history of our state. And so it's not just a big deal, the first state in 60 years to repeal their no rights at work law, but to also send a message to the folks that instituted this over a decade ago that, yes, Michigan is open for business. Yes, we're doing a lot of great economic development work. But if you want to start a business here, if you want to grow your business in Michigan, which is also some of the work that we're doing, you're going to have to pay your workers a fair wage, a decent wage, and you're going to have to respect the right to organize.
No, this is a huge deal. And, again, as you point out, the history, for me, the way the Republicans did it back in 2012 was, as you pointed out, really egregious. And it is the reason that I'm against term limits. Because a lot of the people who voted for it would have never voted for it had they had to stand for election again. This was them being term limited out. They had nothing to lose. They didn't have to answer to anyone, and it was a way to get their next job. So for me, what came of this was horrible policy for working people because of a bad policy in government. So for me, I'm glad to see that you guys have undone this mess.
And thank you for pointing that out, Rick, because it put Republicans on record. I'm not sure how much that you deal with this in your neck of the woods. I'm sure it happens to a certain extent. In Michigan, you have the traditional country club Republicans who are always pro-business, always anti-worker. And then you had some Republicans who are trying to talk the talk without walking the walk. They said not only did they support workers, which understandably, we would have some skepticism for. But they said that if right to work came up, they would vote to repeal it. If prevailing wage came up for a vote, they would vote to restore it. There were some Republicans who would hang out at the local building trades, that would go to UAW meetings, and they would say, hey, we're fighting for these things that you might not agree with, but when it comes to workers' rights, we're going to be there for you. Not a single Republican voted to repeal right to work or to institute prevailing wage. Last term, there were a handful of Republicans, some of which I am currently serving with, who said they would be there when the time came. A decade ago, when it was originally passed, there were Republicans who voted against it and said, it's a bad policy, and if it comes up again, we shouldn't do that. But it put Republicans on the record of not supporting working people.
And this is why I find it important for the president to come out and say what he did today. Look, I know that the PRO Act is not going to get out of the House with Republican control, but it is about putting them on record because they're trying to make a pivot. And I know in Michigan, the Republicans would say, hey, we're the good ones. You trust us. We're good ones. We're seeing Republicans trying to pivot to be all things to all people.
Yeah.
And the reality is if you want to be pro-worker, if you want to stand up for working people, this PRO Act should be the litmus test. If you're not going to support this, sit down and shut up.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say all things to all people. We're finding that at least in Michigan, we know that nationally we have had some problems where Democrats have been a little bit too cozy with business interests or with special interests. But in Michigan, I'm really proud of the party that I come from, and we've been pretty consistent with that. And for a long time, as you know, for a very, very long time, it's always been management versus labor. And at the end of the day, I'm always going to come in on the labor side. But what's been really interesting to see is the radicalization of this Republican Party has made some of those traditional country club conservatives start to realize that not only because Democrats have the first Democratic trifecta in 40 years in Michigan, that they're going to need to work with them, that also a lot of the policies that we're pursuing are going to be good for our economy because they're supporting workers.
Yep.
So for a long time, that those were Republicans were pretending like they supported working people, but were really supporting those special interests and the wealthy and the powerful. Well, what the Democratic Party in Michigan has done is we've consistently supported working people, and we've shown that those pro-worker policies are also good for our economy because, as you know, the economy is made up of working people. And so what's really interesting is some of those groups that have been traditionally conservative, traditionally pro-Republican, are starting to play ball because what are we doing here in Michigan? We're pursuing economic development. We're reinvesting here in Michigan. We're making sure that whether it's electric vehicles or battery manufacturing, cutting edge technology is made here in Michigan, which is great. But we're also making sure that the people that are working in those facilities, that are working in those factories, can join a union, are able to have a living wage, and are able to have their rights protected. So the idea that Republicans were trying to be all things to all people is 100% accurate. But I've been really, really proud that as Democrats in Michigan, we actually have been able to please a lot of different viewpoints that traditionally have been at each other's throats.
No, at the end of the day, if you take care of the working people, everything else is going to come around. For me, it's that simple. You take care of the Joe Six Packs. You take care of the guy who's carrying the jelly bucket into the factory. Things are going to go well. And this is where I think organized labor has done a great job. When I was a kid, it was that frame of union job, better life. If we give people the opportunity to pursue better lives, things are going to, and that's how I think we come out of this massive division that we find ourselves. And I think that's the message for Democrats. Stop with all the divisive stuff. Don't bite into all the Trump insanity. Talk about how you're going to make workers' lives better. And this is a huge part of it. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're Michigan State Representative Jasper Martis. He represents the 69th District in Michigan, talking about I'm struggling to hold on to how excited I am by the fact that finally we have done this, because I'm hoping this spreads. You also undid the attack on prevailing wage. Now, most people don't know what prevailing wage is because all they've been told by the right-wing media is it's bad. What did you guys do on prevailing wage?
So we reinstituted it across the board. Governor Whitmer, in previous sessions, was dealing with a Republican legislature, so we weren't really going to be able to reinstitute it across the board. She did some things based on prioritizing, making sure that we're paying that union standard on certain projects, but that was really only a small amount that we were able to do last session because it was just based on the governor's efforts. But now, having the House and Senate, in addition to the governorship, we were able to institute prevailing wage across the board. And the pitch that I always make to folks when it comes to talking about this issue is that we've talked for a very, very long time about encouraging people to go into the skilled trades, to go into construction, to go into these sectors of the economy that we're seeing more than ever are desperately needed. But we need to make sure that those people are well compensated. And if somebody is a member of a union, if they're if they have their rights protected at work and they have people backing them up, they're probably going to do well. But instituting prevailing wage was a way to make sure that the people that are working on our construction projects and working on other projects across the state are really making a decent and fair wage. And to look at that larger impact, that means that those folks have more money in their pocket, which means they're going to put that into the local grocery store, into the local gas station, into the local sandwich shop. So we're paying our workers more, which is great because everybody deserves dignity of work and respect for the work that they're doing. But it also has that multiplier impact of people are putting more money into their local economy. Yep. And when you look at the construction projects that we're planning to do in Michigan, they're going to be, as President Biden would say, a BFD. And we want to make sure that those folks that for so long have been, I can't tell you the amount of stories I've heard of people that are in IBEW, LEUNA, and a few other unions who have had to travel so far from home to work on projects. We're going to be doing a lot of great construction projects, which mean that those folks can stay close to home and spend more time with their families. And because of prevailing wage, they're going to be bringing home more money that they can put into the local economy. So it's a win across the board. And just along with repealing right to work, another huge win for us here in Michigan.
Now, this is a big one for me because, again, Republicans love to talk about how much they love the building trades. And a lot of my building trades friends are voting Republican. And yet it's the Republicans attempting to destroy prevailing wage, which is the heart of their wage structure, because they're the ones who proudly report their wages, and that's how it's calculated. But also, as you pointed out, and I think aptly, you have a reverberation effect of that money through the local economy, and you have a local building trades. I've been saying one of the problems repealing prevailing wage is you end up getting transient labor coming through doing shoddy work. And
Yes.
I've said 1,000 times, if they're going to build a school where my kid's going to sit in that school, I want the guy who put the roof on, I want his kid sitting next to my kid. So I know that roof doesn't come in. But I guess we're not allowed to have those conversations because Republicans in my state of Pennsylvania, and I'm sure they did it in Michigan as well, have said, if we just repeal this thing, we can save all this money. In fact, you probably heard we could save 25% on building projects if we just did away with prevailing wage. I'm curious, in the time that it was repealed and there was no prevailing wage, how much money did Michigan save on building projects?
Not much, and I don't have the numbers ahead of me, but I know that there was a real struggle with, and this is, I'm sure, been an experience across the Midwest, across the country, just finding people to do the work, period. And it was because of things like prevailing wage and anti-worker policies that have made it less attractive to go into the building trades. So the problem that we were actually running into is a lot of our construction projects were taking longer because a lot of the folks that would have traditionally been attracted to those jobs went into other areas or maybe even move to other areas because they weren't going to be able to make a decent wage. So I don't have the numbers in front of me, unfortunately.
No, the studies, Jasper, are pretty conclusive. They've already been done. You save almost nothing because
Yeah,
the quote-unquote savings by cheating workers out of wages just goes into the contractors' pockets. In fact, when Pennsylvania experimented with doing away with prevailing wage, the bids on projects actually went up. It was going to cost more, which I find just completely hysterical. But these are big deals. Before I let you go, I know you guys got a larger labor package coming soon. I don't know how much bigger you can get than repealing the no rights at work and the prevailing wage. What do you got on the horizon?
So we introduced on our first day in session, January 11th, repealing right to work, restoring prevailing wage, repealing our pension tax, and expanding the earned income tax credit. All four of those things have not only been passed, they've been signed into law by the governor. And we've got 22 months to just keep going. So we're going to have a lot of different packages, whether it's education, whether it's climate change, infrastructure. The one that I'm most excited about and what I'm working on is a labor package. And it's looking at the fact that, as I said before, Democrats have not had a trifecta in Michigan in 40 years, which means there's been a lot of anti-labor legislation passed. And that isn't always the big, sexy things to talk about, like right to work and prevailing wage. Sometimes it's smaller scale things that have had a devastating impact. Sometimes the things like banning local PLAs or defanging and defunding our MIOSHA inspectors, making sure that people actually have folks that are inspecting the job and making sure that everybody is safe. There's a lot of policies that the package is going to be dozens and dozens of bills, but whether it's reforming and benefiting labor when it comes to project labor agreements, whether it's getting more inspectors on the job, whether it's just strengthening and making sure that labor always has a seat at the table. This is going to be the most pro-labor, pro-union legislature in Michigan history, and it's just the honor of a lifetime to be a part of that.
I appreciate you coming sharing some of this with us. I hope all of the other states that we have affiliates in are listening, and we can use Michigan as the template. Much like Wisconsin was the template for destroying working conditions, let's have Michigan be the template for moving us forward. But Jasper, I appreciate the time. Looking forward to having you back again real soon.
Thank you, Rick. And once again, you always get things right, no matter what your wife says. Always happy to be on.
That's why I love you, Jasper. Thanks so much.
I love you too, brother.
Michigan State Representative Jasper Martis. He represents the 69th district there in Michigan. Want to hear your thoughts, questions, comments? Quick break, right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2002. That was the day that the U.S. Supreme Court handed down its decision in the case Hoffman Plastic Compound Incorporated versus the National Labor Relations Board. This case had profound importance for undocumented workers in the United States. The conflict began 14 years before, as the United Cork Linoleum and Plastic Workers of America began an organizing drive at Hoffman. The California company made plastic pipeworks. Hoffman retaliated by firing all the employees that supported the union. One of those fired was Jose Castro, an undocumented worker. The fired workers took their case to the National Labor Relations Board, where they won. The board ruled that the company had to provide back pay for the workers it had unfairly fired. This ruling included Castro. The company decided to fight the decision, and the case wound its way through the courts for a decade. Finally, it arrived on the Supreme Court docket. The highest court in the land ruled in favor of the company in a 5-4 decision. It ruled that as an undocumented worker, Castro could not claim back pay. Writing for the dissent, Justice Stephen Breyer warned that the decision, quote, might very well increase the strength of this magnetic force of undocumented migration. If employers do not worry about the penalties for breaking the law that protect workers, they might be more likely to hire undocumented labor. 10 years after the case, an article in the Princeton Law Review called the decision, quote, a powerful legal symbol of exclusion of immigrant workers. Trying to divide the workforce has long been a tactic of owners determined to break the power of labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So, again, I look at Michigan, and Michigan should be the template for states, for Democratic states across the country to be pursuing. The idea of undoing the horrible and getting workers the opportunity to rebuild, revive, and reunionize our country. I'm looking for great things out of Michigan. And the thing is the prevailing wage part of it is, and he brought up project labor agreements as well. This is a big thing in my world. The idea that, and I look at the perfect example of this. You couldn't have better examples than what happened in New York and what happened in California. You got the Tappan Zee Bridge done with a project labor agreement, all union labor done on time, under budget. It was done well. And the one in California, the Bay Bridge, way over budget, probably never going to get done. Used Chinese labor in the whole 9 yards. To me, there's a lot there, which is why I think it's important to really get behind this kind of stuff. Let's go to the phones. Got Dan on line 1. Dan, how are we doing today? Dan, you there?
Oh, I could barely hear you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, what's on your mind?
I just had a question, or your opinion on how you feel. I work in Illinois. I'm a truck driver, and I work for UPS, and I feel like they have this the new contract coming up, and I think that it's really in the hands of the union of it's in our favor to get a really good contract, considering that we worked all during COVID, and they kept on saying about they were going to give us some kind of bonus or something, and they given management bonuses, including stock, and even little supervisors got checks. And besides that, of how many hours we put in, that I would think, if your opinion, I know you've had family and everything in the trucking business, if you think that they should be able to aim high and get a big, let's say at least, I said in my opinion, at least a $6 raise in this area.
Yeah, look, UPS is an extraordinarily profitable company. You guys have made them extraordinarily profitable. I know some of the people on the negotiating committees, and they're telling me they're aiming high. As far as what dollar amounts are coming, I don't know. I'm in the LTL market. Our contract is up at this time as well. I'm hearing the same kind of things. We're hoping for big money. We'll see what comes out of the bargaining committees. But I'm not going to jump ahead of them and say you're going to get this or that. I think they're going to go negotiate good contracts, and I'm looking forward to it. Got any other thoughts?
Yeah, no. I'm sorry. I'm actually at work right now, and I could barely hear you on my phone.
I appreciate it.
I enjoy your show. I enjoy your show gratefully.
Thank you so much, Dan.
I randomly ran into it, and I really appreciate all you do and all you're giving to the unions out there.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
And I just want to say thank you.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks so much. We got to get that phone fixed. Appreciate the time, Dan. No, see, look, I've got great hopes for the folks at UPS. Their new president, Sean O'Brien, has come in and aggressively going to be pushing for the best contract they can get. Because, look, coming out of the pandemic, one of the things that UPS did that I thought was disgraceful is they had part-timers that they brought in to work inside that they were paying, like I think the contract is like 14 or 15 bucks an hour. They jack their wages up to like 24, 25 in our area where I'm at. And I know across the country, it was kind of the same thing. And then they just arbitrarily said, you know what, screw you guys, we're pulling it all back. Well, those workers got, they did the work during the most difficult time, during the most peak times. And to have those wages taken back, I know the negotiating people, they want to make those wages that they were paying during the pandemic, they want to make those the wages, especially for the people on the inside. What you're going to hear is, well, listen to those drivers. They're making, like Mark Wayne Mullen saying, the drivers make, all this money, or don't make any money. UPS drivers do well. And UPS is going to point out that they pay their drivers pretty well. Those people working inside, the part-timers who really do a great job, they're struggling. This contract, I'm told, is about bringing them up as well as doing well for the drivers and the package and dealing with some of the outsourcing and the part-time and the weekend stuff, and gonna from what I'm told, they're balls to the walls, and they're gonna fight for it, and that's the best you can hope for in this moment. Question is how much will the membership be behind it? I think they're going to be strong behind them. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
The energy equivalent of 600,000 Hiroshima bombs per day are being stored in the ocean, believe it or not.
World oceans hit highest temperatures ever recorded.
We just keep waiting for things to get better, and they seem to just be getting worse.
Entire West Coast salmon fishery closed due to relentless drought. Plus,
our country's natural treasures define our identity as a nation.
President Biden protects public lands and waters with new national monuments.
All of that good and bad news straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The new UN report warns the climate time bomb is ticking and the world is running out of time to avoid catastrophe.
We are nowhere close to making that Paris Agreement goal. To accomplish all of it, developed and the richest nations in the world would need to reach net zero by 2040. That is going to be nearly impossible.
Wow, that's awful. But I guess a shout out to my baby boomers. Feels like we got the last chopper out of Saigon, doesn't it?
Yep, this is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, good to see Al Franken doing comedy again.
Yes, it is.
What do you have for us today?
Well, first, on the heels of a bracing new UN climate report warning the world is moving too slowly to avoid catastrophic global warming, now a new study warns of a looming global water crisis.
Great.
And imminent risk of shortages. The study, published by UNESCO on the eve of a crucial UN water summit, finds that, quote,
KCAA Melinda.